Thank you for your work.
All right, so on this panel, same as the last one, it'll probably just almost be a continuation, but now we have a little more content that Brother Dave just gave us that we can chew on and bounce back and forth. And so I do have questions that we can start with, but let me put it out there first. Do you guys have anything that you want to start the conversation with and ask the panel from the things that you heard? It can be things from earlier if it's still kind of on your mind, but especially from this last session. Yeah, get us going.
I was going to make a comment on the last session, the last question and answer. The Baptist College of Florida, where I went, which now not Baptist College of Florida, so I changed the name again. There was a bunch of really small country churches that all the churches in the state of Florida need to thank God for, because those people viewed it as their sole ministry to have horrible preaching perpetually. I'm not kidding. Like, there's 30 people in the church, and they would get a guy who literally preached his first 15, 20, sermons there,
Right.
and then he would move on, and then they would bring in another guy. And so, I mean, you learn to preach in a local church, and all of those little churches in Jackson County, like, all the rest of the state of Florida needs to praise God for this. But I did have some questions on, you mentioned staff elders, lay elders, paid elders, all that type of stuff. Do you see a distinguishing between the two? There's two schools of thought, and I would like to hear it. Where there's the one school of thought is there is just elders, elder, pastor, same title, same everything, staff, not staff, paid, not paid. And then there are others who, well, the teaching pastor, executive pastor, associate pastor, well, that's our elder board. And I can see the benefits and strengths, and I know it's just semantics, but I would be curious to hear your thoughts, because it's something I'm wrestling through within our church.
It's definitely not semantics, because I think, 1 Timothy 3, overseer is an elder, is pastor, we see in Ephesians 4. They're the same office. So, there are, especially in the church planting movement, there are a lot of church plants now that are opting to say everyone's title is elder. And then, some churches that are saying there is no senior pastor. And you've got freedom to do that. I think it's a prudential call. I mean, certainly we see in 1 Timothy 5 that there are those elders, especially who give themselves to the work of preaching and teaching. And typically in most churches, that's going to be the senior pastor. In my church, we take the first among equals approach. I mean, there's a lot that I'm delegated to do and be responsible for because my church so generously provides financially for me to give my time to that. But I'm also one vote. And so it's like, I'm not the one that's just calling all shots. I don't chair the elder board at my church. One of our associate pastors got led to do that. He's leading that. So I think what's most important is that every pastor in your church is an elder, if he's got the title pastor, and every elder is a pastor in that respect too. We're all one board. Because I know there are some churches where you'll have the title pastor, but you're not an elder. And that doesn't really make sense biblically. Every pastor is an elder. And every elder is a pastor in respect. So I'm okay with, we've got a senior pastor, associate pastor. That's defined by our church constitution. And lay elders just describes they're not in the pay of the church. But an elder is an elder.
Yeah, but and I fully agree with that. There's equality in the eldership, but there's different functions, and we need to recognize that. When Paul is traveling with Titus or Tychicus, Paul's got a different function than Titus or Tychicus or Timothy or Silas even. There's a different function. And so I think you look at it and you realize there's some that God raises up that are going to be the primary preaching pastors, which means they're going to be the senior pastor, lead pastor, whatever you want to title it. I think we can overdo that. All right, let me flip to the other side. With some of the churches that or some of the guys I'm talking with, everybody's the same. Okay, great. So everybody's just swapping the pulpit, and and rotating it around. I think we're going to come back to some of Joni's concern where there's probably not as strong of preaching. So we need to have the humility to recognize this brother has the gifts, and so we want to compensate him so that he can preach to us and do most of the preaching, but we also don't want to burn him out, and we also want the church to be prepared. He could drop dead from a heart attack, and we want the church to be able to continue. And see, I went through that when I had my cancer diagnosis, and I was out for 4 months, and I just had to turn it loose to the other guys. And I mean, I couldn't do anything. I couldn't get around, didn't go in the office, didn't do any pastoral work or anything. And I wasn't physically able, I couldn't be around people. So that was one of those occasions where equipping guys so that they were ready to step up was very important. But I got back in, and I got back in the saddle and enjoyed doing it. So I think, think about function. You could use team illustrations. Everybody on the football team or a basketball team or a baseball team doesn't have the same function. Everyone's got some different functions. And everybody's not going to be pitching. Everybody's not going to be the point guard. Everybody's not going to be the quarterback. You're going to have some that are particularly gifted to be able to do that. Now, and I think that's maybe not a good illustration, but it's a functional illustration about function in the church. So I'm a little concerned if a guy has a title of elder and he's expected to preach. I don't see that anywhere in the New Testament. He's expected to teach. And Paul obviously made some distinctions about teaching and preaching. And so, he may not be the pulpit guy. He may be, I think you were talking about that earlier, he may be great in the classroom setting, but there's generally someone who's going to rise in terms of the function of being able to preach well.
And I want to ask again, or continue with this for you guys on that everything. So you have a conversation, and this is going off what Daniel said. You run into somebody and you say, "Yeah, we have elders at our church," and they say, "Oh, we have a preaching pastor, senior pastor, we have a music pastor, and we have a youth pastor."
Yeah.
Where might we be talking past each other? Because they might say, "Well, elder, pastor, same thing," which that's kind of what I think what you're saying there as far as describing the office, maybe even a bishop, but where, if you want to use that term, but where might we be crossing one another with what what you guys mean, and what he probably means with the youth pastor, worship pastor, senior pastor? What would that be? Similar, different?
Yeah. Well, for one thing, he's missing the incredible gift of lay elders who haven't experienced the tunnel vision of being seminary trained and spending all their life in ministry. I mean, I look at it, and I started pastoring when I was 24, 23, 24, something like that. And so I pastored for 44 years and just straight on through. So I wasn't working out in the community doing other things. So I've got tunnel vision that I don't know where that tunnel vision is. And so my fellow elders who happen to be doing other kind of work in the community could see some things that I couldn't see. Obviously, I could see some things that maybe they couldn't see because of my experience in training and reading and all that. So that's where you need the kind of balance. I think you're going to be lopsided if all you have are seminary graduate, professional, John Piper, professional ministers. Brothers, we are not professionals, he says. But I think we're going to lose something of the gravity of what we need with the eldership. So.
I want to speak to it, but not from a position of one who has arrived. I think these brothers are further along in the process, and it's very clear, but at least maybe it will help someone. So I'm in a context where if you were brought on as a pastor, they wouldn't know it, but they're elder. But when I say they, the congregation where I'm at, they've never used the term elder, but they understand these are the 1 Timothy 3 qualified men of the church. And we are senior pastor, worship pastor, youth pastor, and they are the pastors of the church. And we function as the elders of the church. And then you have the deacons, and it's understood they are the servants of the church, and yet we bring them in the pastoral meetings or the elders' meetings, and we utilize them for wisdom and counsel. But there's also an understanding of you guys carry the ministry of the preaching and vision ministry of the church, and we are here to help and support. However, I feel like we're at that crossroads, and I was actually speaking with our youth pastor just in between services. We're just really having to think, man, is it time? We've got guys who are deacons who would be qualified lay elders. And so we're having to think through right now, is now the time for us to educate our church and transition into that? And, in a sense, I just want to say, I've felt okay with doing that. We function biblically with pastors and deacons serving, but it seems like you're kind of wrestling with that same question. But what about the wisdom of lay elders? And I'm sitting here going, yeah. If a couple of guys leave pastorally, would it be clearer if I had a couple of guys who were lay elders and not just the deacons help the senior pastor out for a year? And so I would just look at it as, hey, in the natural maturation of our church, we're growing into that. And the next step would be to make sure that our leadership board is very clear on the distinctions of what these pastors have been doing, they will continue to do, and these lay elders will continue to serve in those non-primary vision and teaching ministries, but still as overseers, and then really get the church clear on that. And when the time's right, I think you said prudential call, I think we would move forward in that.
And you have an unusually gifted youth pastor. Like, tell them about your youth pastor. This is not the run-of-the-mill youth pastor with like how we traditionally hear it. You used to be my youth pastor in the 90s.
Yeah.
Is it the same thing?
No.
Please explain.
Well, he was the youngest to ever graduate from Southern Seminary with a master's degree. We'll start there.
Right.
And that's what he gets for leaving early.
He was here a little bit ago.
But he does have a 4-month-old at home and another one. But he's incredibly gifted. But he's also, man, you talk about humble and teachable, because that's kind of the thing that it's the knock that often when guys come out of seminary. He's also got a doctorate from Midwestern. And we were talking about our discipleship groups earlier, and we're years into that now, and we've got a 101, 201, 301 that we track our people through, and he's written that curriculum, and that's your youth pastor.
Yeah, so just to be clear, when I'm saying somebody who says youth pastor, music pastor, and I'm saying, we bypass each other, it wouldn't be Jason.
Yes.
That's a different conversation.
Yeah. You have an unusual situation. I want to just illustrate. I like illustrations. In 1972, the Miami Dolphins went undefeated. And does anybody know who the starting quarterback of the Miami Dolphins was back then? Bob Greasy.
Yeah.
However, for several games, he was out. Who filled in for him?
Number 15.
That's right. Played for the Baltimore Colts. Shula also coached for Old Moral. So,
Yeah, the only reason I remember that, I was a senior in high school.
well, I point that out to say it's not like Bob Greasy or Earl Morrall were more important than kick or zonka or just go through that incredible, all those leaders had to step up and do something.
Yeah.
And we can sometimes think of you might think Bob Greasy only, but what the illustration shows us is that at any point, one of us can go down, and we need to prepare the church for lay and staff elders as well.
What would be a way to, if you are convinced that going back to Daniel's question real quick, we want to make sure everyone understands pastors, elders, bishops, deacons, and of our pastors, elders, bishops, we want to communicate that is one board, if you will, one council. We don't want people to have these kind of, all of a sudden, a third office. We have the office of pastor, now we have the office of elder over here, and then the office of deacons. What are some ways to help teach our churches, lead our churches to make sure that because that's going to be hard. I mean, his position, if he goes that route, it's going to take, people are like, wait, you're calling that guy a pastor? No, you guys are, What are some ways to help us maybe blend that so people start to catch that?
Are you asking how we get the staff elders and the elders to be seen as part of the same thing?
Yeah. Elders,
There's a number of things to do at one. We have to teach it, put it into the bylaws and get it approved. And then there's still more work to be done because they still want to say, I know that's my elder, but you're pastor.
Right.
And that still happens. And so when I get up and do announcements, something practical I do, hello, good morning, welcome to this gathering of Plato Baptist Church. My name is Garrett. I serve as the senior pastor on behalf of all of our pastors here this morning. We just want to greet you in the Lord. Pastors, raise your hand. I said, if you have questions about the church, these guys would love to talk to you, and just constantly put them up and promote them as pastors.
Yeah.
At our members' meetings, all of our pastors are involved, so we present new members there. So, our lay elders will have some of those membership interviews conducted. You present the candidate that you interviewed. So they're just seeing 6 times a year, pastors and elders that are working together as one. If there's ever something that comes from us, it's presented, this comes from your elders. So every membership recommendation comes as a recommendation from the elder board as a whole. On our Sunday evening prayer times, if we have an elders meeting come out, we have a request for the upcoming elders meeting. So they're just aware how often we're meeting. There's reports that come from the elder board. It's on our website, right? So you go to our website and you look at elders, you're going to see our staff pastors listed right there with the lay elders. And things like that just hammer home, this is one board.
Yeah, there's a lot of teaching, and it takes time. Thanks be to the Lord. It takes time, but we have to be very intentional that there is a distinction between pastors, overseers, elders, and deacons in terms of both office and function. And I think if we just have pastoral staff, we're not going to communicate that. Now, right now, you guys, the 3 of you are all serving as the elders of the church. But to your church, you're the church staff. And so what you want to be able to communicate is, we have other men that are biblically qualified, and Daniel gave me a wonderful insight, not guys that have areas of disqualification, but really have areas of qualification. And they're biblically qualified, and they're shepherding the church. And so you're working to do course correction in the way a Baptist church thinks. That is a big job. And it's a very challenging job. And sometimes it's a painful job because there may be a lot of reaction to it. But what you're trying to communicate is the church staff is not the only group that is shepherding the congregation. There are some guys that have never set foot in a seminary that are faithful men. They're teaching, they're shepherding, they're managing the flock, and they are partnering with those that happen to have had the opportunity to do the training for ministry, and they're doing it side by side with us. Yes, you're in the pulpit. They're not in the pulpit so often, maybe once in a while, or but like Dave and like Garrett is saying, use every opportunity to highlight those men serving as equals. Our pastors do that. We have 4 elders, 2 of the guys are staff pastors, 2 lay elders, and typically they'll do the very same thing you said. I'm John, I'm one of the elders here. I'm Joshua, I'm one of the pastors here. And they'll do it like that.
Questions, other questions of the panel?
When I first got here, we had probably 5 elders, 4 or 5 elders. And it didn't last long, but once next to their name, it said homebound people, or
Yep.
what was another, I can't think of the others. But
Yeah, elder of elders overseeing counseling, elder of,
And
yeah.
I like that, because then we kind of knew as a membership who to go to if we needed something in that area, but we don't do that anymore.
Right. Would you guys speak to whether you do that or not in your churches as far as this is the area that elder covers, or do you stay away from that and just try to, elders do all kinds of things or whatnot? What would you say?
We stay away from that as elders because we want our members to know every elder shepherds and pastors broadly. I know some churches even decide they take what's called a parish model. Hey, this elder is responsible for these 30 to 40 members. I understand that's got some positives organizationally, but I think it also can produce some negative things where a member thinks this is my elder, or even an elder thinks this is my member, versus just, hey, we're all broadly shepherding. And then what ends up happening is that multiple elders are involved with the member, and they get multiple elders shepherding them, encouraging them, praying for them. We get specific on deacons, so we have a deacon of member care. Practical work, deacon of member care help oversee all the homebound members that they're not falling through the cracks. So they actually report to the pastors if something's going on we need to be aware of, and they let the members know, hey, this individual needs meals. So that does help our members out.
Within the elders' body, we divided up responsibilities so that guys could focus time and attention on it. So we had a couple of guys that were in charge of the education. There were a couple of us in charge of missions, a couple of us dealing with worship and so forth. And so we had areas, but we didn't publish that, and I don't remember us even talking about it with the congregation. We did that more for divide and conquer. You know, we divided the congregation up into shepherding groups, and that worked well for us so that an elder had a particular number of folks. And when we got in elders meetings, then it's give us a report on your shepherding group, and so issues are brought up, and that's where the multiple layering will take place out of that. So.
Did the members know that as well, that they had an elder?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh yeah. Yeah, because we asked them to try to meet with them once a month, and generally it was we had shepherding groups Sunday, first Sunday of the month, typically, and usually get together for a meal after the morning worship service, and so that began to build some relationships, and ended up being very fruitful for us.
You two guys want to comment on that?
The only thing I would add is that we do task specific deacons, not elders.
We did that too.
Yep.
Good question. Other questions you guys have on elders, deacons, or again, just reminding you on Dave's talk, the 8 different marks or points that he had. If you are raising up leaders, some of those different things.
Ways.
8 ways. Yeah, Dan, go ahead.
I don't have a question, Tom. I have a problem with the most biblically qualified men in my church to serve as elders are in such high demand everywhere else. The availability issues.
In their lives, they're in high demand.
Well, you know, they're managing a $100 million company with 80 hours a week because they're a quality person of character and ability. Or one of them's assistant fire chief for the city of Gainesville. They worked a 96-hour shift the other day. Or, they've adopted 5 kids. It's one of those that the guys that are biblically qualified normally are not sitting around working 12 hours a week. Like, what do you do with that when, how can I make the job of being an elder less time demanding? How can I help them navigate that? Because they're very high functioning individuals. They're very qualified. Just you look at the office of elder and you go, man, I don't have that.
Yeah, we have that same situation. Charlotte is a financial district, banking. Yeah. So when we sit down with a prospective elder, we meet with them and their wife. This is way down the process. It's right before you're ready to nominate. We talk with them, and if they're married, the wife. And the question always comes up, what's the time commitment? And we just say, listen, the meetings are not the time commitment. I mean, the meetings are not hard to commit to. We do at least one meeting a month. It's on a weeknight. Maybe 2 meetings a month. It just depends on the month. That's not the commitment. The commitment is to the people. And it's your commitment to evangelize, disciple, and practice hospitality. To when the church is gathered, you're there. That's the commitment. That's actually useful for a lot of people. Like, oh, well, we're already trying to live this out as church members. So just, like, we wouldn't be talking to you if you weren't already doing this. Like, if you weren't doing the work of an elder, we wouldn't be considering making you an elder. Like, we're just recognizing what's already happening. So I think that's one different way to think about it. The other thing is just, I think that's what it is. So in our church, I would have loved for us to have more lay elders right now. We've got a lot of guys in their 30s and early 40s who are in places in their families and careers where it's very time demanding, time consuming. And then we've got empty nesters who've come from other churches and they're tired. And some of them are jaded by the local church. So that can feel difficult. Like, well, this is where we're at. We've got those who have the time, who just don't have the desire, and some that have the desire, who don't have the time. I just trust that's where the Lord has us. And we've got 2 guys who are in that category of growing their families and growing their careers, who are sacrificially serving and giving. And I just trust the longer these 2 brothers serve, others will take note and say, yeah, it requires a sacrifice. And the question was asked, I think, is it worth it? Who was asking that? Is it worth it? Tom was when he was leading music. Is it worth it? Helen Roosevelt has a great response to that question, the missionary. Is it worth it? The answer is, he is worth it. And is it worth the time? Well, the Lord is worth it. And you have to be wise about the commitment, but we want to call people to give sacrificially.
Others? Don't zone out on me yet. I got a little bit of time, so come on. Yes.
So the question is like, how do I make sure that I don't set up the standard too high to where everyone gets disqualified?
Yeah. So, real quick, for clarity, on too high on the character qualities,
Yeah.
or too high on the teaching ability?
No, got it. Everything.
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 Yeah. All right, I'm going to go back. We were having a really good discussion at lunch. The character qualities, and you were mentioning those today, that they're not outlandish, so they're not way out, and they're really very reasonable. It's outside of the teaching and managing the church. Outside of that, it's just the fruit of the Spirit being displayed. So that's what you're looking for. Do those men display the fruit of the Spirit? Have they arrived? Of course not. You haven't either. So you recognize that. So this is where you want to be reasonable. Are these men demonstrating love? Are they walking in the peace of Christ? Are they living in the joy of Christ? Is there patience and kindness and gentleness in their life? Is there faithfulness, goodness, self-control in their life? Do you see those qualities evident? Because that's really what's coming out in the family qualities and the self-control qualities and the very positive qualities in 1 Timothy 3 and Titus 1. So translated, and this is where I'm thinking, I was describing this at lunch, I'm thinking, when you look at 1 Timothy 3 and Titus 1, and you go, wow, that's so daunting. I think Galatians 5:22 and 23 is very daunting. And so if you think of those qualities of the fruit of the Spirit as an arrow that's running through the life of that man, and then it's produced in their exercise and self-control. They treat their wife well. They're not bullies. They're kind. They're hospitable. It's just normal Christian living. Look at guys that are living good, normal Christian lives, and that's reasonable. So, all right, let me flip the other side on it. If you see something that gives you great concern, then put the brake on.
Amen.
Go ahead and put the brake on. I was telling Daniel that one of the lessons that I've been learning over the years, and I wish I'd learned much earlier, is when I see a yellow flag, I need to treat it as a red flag. And that doesn't mean try to control everything and be too harsh with guys. I mean, you got to give guys room, but if you see something that really concerns you, then probably that guy doesn't need to be an elder right now. Give them time, maybe later on, maybe 2 years, 3 years, 5 years down the road. Or you may go, wow, I sure am glad that we didn't bring that guy on.
The other guys want to speak to this?
I'll just say a couple of things. One, I would say, in a multitude of counsel, there is safety. And so in asking others if it's an overwhelming, we believe he's clearly qualified. Maybe you've seen something you referenced in your talk where a guy was sharp. And you can get to the point where, okay, you can tell this guy in his personality, there's a little something that slips out every once in a while. And you're scared to death you're going to get the guy in and have to undo something, which is really difficult. But I would say if there's a multitude of counsel that says, hey, we're with you and we don't see anything glaring. On the other hand, if you're sold on the guy and your counsel is going, we are not with you. We see major things. I think I would heed that counsel there. And then I think I would consider two things. If there is something that you don't think is disqualifying, but it's a maturity issue, I'll just be very open up front that we're going to go to work on this. I think we need to grow in this. And I think it can be something that's not disqualifying, but I would say all of our pastors have areas that need to be spoken into where we need to continue maturing. You just tell the guy up front.
Yeah, I think when you ask if this man's life and ministry, if more people in our church, their life and ministry looked like this man's, what would our church be like?
That's good.
So I think that's just an important factor. And then at his point, in our church, the elders recommend elder nominations to the congregation to vote on. And so we're all coming to an agreement on things. And for me as a senior pastor, these days, I rarely contribute a name even to our list because I just want to listen and hear who the other guys see. They say all the names I would say anyways. If they didn't, then I would speak up. But I don't want to be the one to be driving the ship. I want to hear what they think. And then in lunches, if I go to lunch with a member, I just, I'll regularly ask, hey, who do you think you could see serving as an elder in our church someday? It's just interesting to hear a response. Or if anyone ever asks me, hey, when do you think we'll get more elders? I'll say, well, who do you think should be serving as an elder? And I just get to hear from them. That helps me hear how the congregation is perceiving a man's ministry.
I would simply add that all of these things are really good. I think even Phil's, when I was younger, when I first started out, and I heard what you were saying, I was like, yeah, fruit of the Spirit, amen, yeah. But I don't think I didn't have the eyes to watch it, to really see what you're talking about. And I think our wives can be very helpful to us in observing things and nuances we don't see. So they can talk about competent members about who they see. I think even our wives can get tremendous help to us about things that they're seeing in dynamics and relationships and marital relationships that we just assume are normal and healthy. But sometimes, they see things we don't see. And wolves don't just come in male form. they come in female as well, and sometimes that wife paired with that man. You got to look. There's so much to look at, and so there could be a lot of generosity and grace given to a guy who has different styles of teaching abilities and different. But like that area that Phil's talking about can be devastating to a church if you let that person into a board who you didn't know was contrarian, or that his wife was constantly unhappy, or just a number of problems that could come from that. So this, I just want to like raise that flag a little bit more what Phil was talking about, because we're so eager to get that help. We can bring somebody onto a board and be like, we can be stuck with in a very painful situation.
Real quick, Mike, make sure if you were putting somebody forward as elders, leaders, pastors in your churches, I'm sure you want unity on a lot of things. There's some things that you wouldn't necessarily all have to agree on, but you can submit to your fellow brothers, I'm guessing. So, one, is that true? Or there's some things that you can disagree on, and that's okay. It still moves forward. It still goes to the congregation. But then on this topic, do you guys have to have unity with those that you're with on this?
We decide our elder board, this is the only unanimous elder vote, is an elder nomination.
Even so, a deacon one would not need to be?
No.
Okay.
I'll second that motion.
Second that?
Yeah, we were.
Discussion?
Some elders and deacons.
Okay. So you unanimous on elders and deacons for you guys? Okay. So, okay. Yeah. I just want to be clear.
I think we've not gotten to the place where there's disagreement, but if there was a significant disagreement, I think it's wise to pull back a recommendation like on deacon. But the reason we require with an elder is, first off, every elder on that room is going to be serving this prospective elder. So if one doesn't want to, again, you'd be wise to take more time. Why don't you want to serve with this brother? Or why are you hesitant? Because then you're requiring a brother to serve with them, and that can create a dynamic that is really holding you back.
Yeah. And in Dave's talk, he said that if you want to get into church planting, just raise up more elders than you need. And part of what we're talking about specifically right now is about these elders recognizing how to function and things. Other questions along this line of raising up elders in our church, or those that come up that we would be sending out? Other questions here?
So with that mentality, then should we not be teaching in a way that inspires all men to aspire to be elders, whether they are elders or want to become, but teaching that to our men? This is what we all should aspire to be. This is biblical for a biblical man. That should do.
Yeah, I think that's natural. What we want to communicate is this is what a Christian's faithful life and practice should look like. I mean, it doesn't cover every detail, and you can see some differences in Titus and 1 Timothy. But this is what a Christian life ought to look like. So yeah, the men ought to aspire. The young men ought to aspire. And so you encourage them on that. And you let them know that doesn't mean you'll necessarily be an elder, because the elder is going to be shepherding the flock, but you need to be living your life like this in Christ.
Can I ask for a clarification for you guys on, I'm aspiring to have the character that I see listed, or I aspire to learn to teach more so I can teach my family at least, because I'm not interested in teaching anybody else, but I want to disciple my family or somebody else, versus the idea in 1 Timothy 3, like aspire to the office.
Yeah.
Help us know from all four of you guys, what does that mean to aspire to the office versus aspiring to just be a godly man that you're talking about?
Yeah, I think if you're aspiring to the office, then you're feeling the weight of shepherding a flock. You're thinking about particular people, and you feel that weightiness and that burden, and you're embracing it, that this is something that in my heart of hearts, I desire to do, and I'm concerned for the flock. And if that's the case, you're going to already be doing some shepherding. But I would distinguish it like that. We ought to have lots of good aspirations in our life, and that's great. But aspiring to the office means a responsibility, and it means I'm willing to do this and stand before a holy God who, according to Hebrews 13, is going to hold me accountable. So,
Well, again, underneath of this clearly Southern Baptist version, if anyone aspires to be an overseer, he desires a noble work. Yeah, I think we need to allow for there to be freedom. I think we want to encourage men to aspire, but we want there to be freedom. Like, again, we're Baptists, so we understand every member has an important ministry, the office of membership. So we want to teach every member your role is important and essential to the local church and the spread of the gospel through the local church. Some men will never be, in fact, most men in a local church will never be an elder. And some of those men don't ever need to be, like deacon is what God's called them to, and that is a wonderful way to serve the local church. And being a member is a wonderful way. So I have, I think I can say never, I've never tried to talk a man into serving as an elder.
Right, that's right, I agree.
And I will say something like, hey, you should pray about this. I can see you being an elder one day in our local church. And I think sometimes in this loaning that confidence to a brother, maybe the boost he needs in aspiring, but I think talking someone into serving as an elder can be a very foolish step.
Yeah.
So give them confidence. Say love them.
Yeah, lend them that confidence.
Lend them the confidence.
I can see you serving as an elder in our local church one day.
Jason, do you have something? Okay, great.
I'm gonna go out now. I appreciate how at our members meeting, every once in a while, you'll say, do you see someone that you could recommend as being a deacon or an elder? Just the members, just random people, and we give them to you, y'all do whatever you want, but at least we as members can step forward and have a little bit of a say as to who we see coming up in the church, and
You have we want to consider that, and then you have a lot of say. You have all the say in the sense of at final time when it comes to vote, because we're congregation ruled, so you have all that say. But those who are nominated or put forward would come from us. But we do want to hear, like you were saying, from them. So.
Yeah, I think, in our church constitution, it says that we will regularly solicit the feedback of members. But it also says in our constitution that the elders nominate.
Right.
I think that's wise because I can think of a situation in our church of someone that a lot of people have asked me, well, why is such and such not an elder? And my response whenever I get that question is, it's almost always inappropriate for me to answer the question, why is such and such not an elder? And what that means is there are some situations that don't need to be public in church. If a man's marriage is just in a difficult place, it doesn't mean people need to know that. But the elders know that, and that's the reason we're not nominating that man, and it would almost always be inappropriate for me to comment on that.
Just with what we're talking about, when I was over here and started the walk, becoming an elder here, we had a policy that would watch that person for at least a year, just watching them. And through that process, Billy come to me one point and said, okay, this is what we're seeing, and it's the way I would sometimes come across could be taken as being harsh. My intent was not that way, but I'm a black and white type person, so it could, come across it, which, okay. So intentionally, we're talking about intentionality, Billy even started working with me on that process. So, that was a good thing, all the way around. I was able to grow in that, and then eventually move into lay elder position here at the church. So it's great whether I ever become an elder or not, because it's growth. And I think sometimes we forget that. Just the growing and the cycling is a good thing.
Yeah. Well, to your point, in my last church I served in, we realized that, and it was actually our lay elders, we felt like our lay elders were they got on the board and set the bar so high that we weren't able to bring on more lay elders. And they were remembering something that a brother had said or did 8 years before. It's like, hey, the benefit of being a local church for a long time is that you get to see growth and development. You've got to overlook some of those things they did in their youth. That's not who they are anymore. And feel like you're holding that against them as to why not to bring them on the board. Is there anything we've seen in recent history that is positive growth, or negative things we need to be concerned about in recent history? And we had to revisit that as a board.
Winding down, any last questions you guys have that you want to discuss? As a way of reminder, some of those 8 ways.
8 ways, not 8 marks and not 9
Yeah.
years, 8 ways.
Consider staffing positions for training, godly encouragement and feedback, not a flattery culture. Start with evangelism, provide leadership and teaching opportunities, point them to the elder qualifications, provide content to equip, invite faithful men into your exemplary life, and be a faithful pastor yourself. Any of those things spur on a question for the group to discuss?
Yeah, how do you avoid getting elders or people in positions of authority that would be a flatterer to getting certain things done? Like, let's say like obviously a lead pastor in a church will always have a big persuasion among the majority of people. So how can you get other men beside you that aren't going to be just saying yes to everything that you throw out as ideas for the church?
Yeah, I will say this, you don't want yes men, but I'll say, I feel like I hear this a lot, and I feel there's a sensitivity to the yes men. Garrett mentioned contrarians. I feel like contrarians are equally a threat. Nothing will like suck the joy out of serving besides being with a contrarian who feels like it's their job to be the no person. So I think, all right, positively how do we say that? You want a man who can think biblically. So I've got 3 staff elders, staff pastors on staff who serve with me. We're all elders. We all have votes. I've been tasked with supervising our office during the week. So at the end of the day, if those brothers, I'm assigned to make sure the tasks they've been given, they're doing them well. And if they would need to take vacation, they send me an email. But at the end of the day, we've all got a vote. And sometimes the question would be raised, well, how do you keep those guys from being yes men? It's like, well, we should have never hired them if they can't think biblically. And I do understand my role. I always reinforce to them, you guys vote how you want to vote. When we went through COVID and, you know, pastors, we were making all those crazy decisions we never thought we'd have to make because there's an ordinance in our city with masks. And what do? I just told our guys, like, hey, vote how you want to vote. And I got voted against probably 5 times to bring our service back inside. So we were being outside. And I told them, I was like, look, you vote against me if you want. I think we should come back inside. But if you guys think we should stay outside, I will trust that that's the wisdom of God given to our elder board. And there's a lot of freedom there for them to know they can vote against me. And there's a lot of freedom for me to know, you know what? If I'm wrong, I want them to vote against me. Like, I don't know what's in the situation, so I'm going to trust the Lord's the wisdom he gives to the corporate board. So I'd say, yeah, we would be sensitive to yes men, but I wonder if there are other things we need to be sensitive to in a local church.
How do you avoid having yes men or people that you can kind of manipulate or abuse? Ooh, what a big question. But I would just say simply, I think that if you're in a dynamic where you're the lead pastor, greater among equals, I like that statement better, where you're kind of serving that role of greater among equals. First among equals. You have to model it. You have to be willing to do different things where you ask for feedback, honest feedback. You create the culture and the environment where you can disagree with me. You can say what you think, and you're not going to get blackballed or pushed into a corner. And so you have to initiate that. That would be the first thing. And then secondly, when it happens, you have to then shepherd. And I'll just give you an example. We've been in a 2-month discipline case at our church. And we've disagreed more over the past 2 months than I can remember on a leadership level. And we've said we want honest feedback. We say we want people to speak their conscience, and they have, and they've disagreed with me, and I've disagreed with them, and I've disagreed with my best friend who's on the board, and we've left there not agreeing, but we've left there in unity. And it didn't get there overnight, and it's just, you've had to, I wish someone would speak to what you said about honest feedback. That's just so good. And so anyway, I just think it has to come from the first among equals. I think it needs to be then modeled by the elder board, and then it creates the culture of the church.
Phil's book, Elders in the Life of the Church, has a section on this, on looking out for that and dealing with that. But I do think that there's, I see there are examples of the abusive CEO bulldozing pastor. I mean, that's for real. I think the majority of our churches are not like that because they're not large like that. They're not huge like that. There are churches that just kind of want a pope in the church. For some reason, that's just what they're into. That's a whole other discussion. But I think developing biblically minded men, as my brother said, and having that attitude from the senior standpoint, where I'm at is they look to me because I've been doing it the longest and I have the most experience and I'm connected to a network of pastors I'm in conversation with. And we come to the table with the same goal. How do we get the ball in the hole? How can they both, so if they've hired me to be their senior pastor, they're thinking, how can we use this particular tool the most effective way for our church? And I'm trying to help see them be used the same way. But there's some guys who just want to come on the board and like, it's my job to keep you in check. Well, it's my job to make sure you don't come on because that's not the spirit of this board. There's that you can't allow for that either. That's the other extreme from the abusive pastor. And those guys are in big trouble and they're not helpful. They just fool themselves too.
If your staff pastors get along and like each other, you shouldn't be suspicious of that. You should praise God for that. I know you talk to enough churches. How many churches do you visit where there's dysfunctional staff pastors? Think about it. You work with your staff pastors every day, in and out. There's just chances to annoy each other. Even things that aren't sinful, just personality or preference or conviction. So if you can get through all that and you still like each other, enjoy being around each other, that's something to praise God for, and not to say like, oh, well, it seems like you guys are all just exercising groupthink. You gotta be more careful about that. Like being like-minded is not groupthink. You want men again, I think, who can think biblically as good lay or staff.
Yeah, and the whole board needs transparency and humility, so that you're free to interact and you know that you love each other, you genuinely love each other, you genuinely enjoy being with each other. And I think that, if somebody is that kind of contrarian, they're not going to genuinely be loving the others on the elder board. And so they certainly don't need to be on it. But everybody needs, and I think that's one of the things you reinforce is that humility, transparency. One of the things that we did right after it, shortly after the book came out, but Paul Tripp's book, Lead, he just deals with stuff like this. Every single chapter is just slicing your chest open and taking a look at what's inside. And we read through on that, and I let different guys lead the discussion on it. And then I knew there were things that I wanted to press in, but I tried to let them press as much, and then I would press this and press that. But because he's dealing with those kinds of issues where we end up being dysfunctional as a group of spiritual leaders in the church. And I would highly recommend that.
Just a side note there, anytime, at least, and Dave kind of spoke to this, when you hear people, some of that language of yes men, I think the person who's making that statement probably was not somebody who was sitting in on the meetings, who has listened to disagreements. They're probably ignorant on what goes on in the meetings. And most likely, probably something happened and they're, like the senior pastor, one of the elders came, or the senior pastor came, dealt with that person, had to deal it, and so then it's more of an attack of, you've come against me, well, you just have yes and they disagree with you. Not truly going, I'm so worried, as I've observed, as I've sat in here, I'm so worried that you guys are just agreeing and you're just saying yes to him. Like, I doubt that that's most of the time where that's coming from, although it could exist, but I think that's probably not where it's coming from.
The yes men situation is discernible where the senior pastor is clearly going off the rails.
Yeah,
right.
He's doing stuff in the pulpit he's got no business doing.
Right.
He's like, true story. There's a church in Kentucky where the pastor's going around with no shirt on because he's been working out and wants everybody to see it. Like, yes men have been involved there. Something's gone wrong. if pastors going around shirtless, or the pastor's beginning to manipulate and squeeze his way around the statement of faith, or clearly the finances are getting, they're not transparent. All those kinds of things tell you yes men's around. But like the situations where a guy is bringing up the yes men and like there's no evidence whatsoever that that's going on, well then you got another, that's the guy that you're talking about, look out for. But the yes men situation will be seen if you just pay attention to the finances, what and how that senior pastor is living. That's when you know the men around him have no spot.
Last question. Who has one last one for us? You've been thinking of it. It's right there in your brain. You want to ask it, but you're nervous about asking it. Don't be nervous. Go ahead and ask it. What is it? Ashton, you have it?
Sure, I'll go.
I knew it.
I'm not a pastor. I spend a lot of time with a lot of different pastors, and boundaries and protecting their family, how does that collide with point 2 where you invite men into your exemplary life?
Yeah, I think that's part of the role, it's part of the office. My wife was game for that when I became a pastor. If she was not, then I would trust that that was the Lord leading me to not serve as pastor. Meaning, like, I don't think a guy needs to convince his wife from his service, but there's a desire. We're going to open up our life and home. Of course, there's wisdom being exercised. And part of managing your own household well is mean that your marriage is healthy. You're shepherding your kids well. So I think the common language that gets applied is work-life balance, and I'm not a huge fan of that term. I think pastoral is more work-life integration. So there's wisdom with that, right? So it's like I'm bringing people into my home. I need to be careful that my wife and kids are ready for that. There's seasonal determinations for that. We've got 3 in high school right now, and I no longer host my small group in the home because we have kids spread out around the house trying to have quiet spaces to study. When they were younger and they were going to bed at 7 p.m., I did all my small groups in the home. It served my wife and my family better for me not to be out of the house. But now it serves my wife and family better for me to do that group over at the church because my son needs the front room to do his study while my daughter's in the dining room and the other daughter's upstairs. So I think that's work-life integration. So I think some of it is leading well in the home is a husband asking his wife, hey, how are we doing with this? Planning together. We plan our hospitality schedule together, and then recently we did dial it back a little bit because my wife is working full-time as a first grade teacher. Here's what's going on this semester with college visits and things like that. We need to adjust, and we're going to trust the Lord that our capacity is going to increase down the road, and we can do some things we did previously, but there's wisdom in all of that. So I don't know if that answers your question, but I think it's the road of wisdom.
Good, brother. All right, well, we will end there for this evening. And so what we have now is basically dinner, or it'll be ready here shortly. And so from now until dinner, we can find out if it's exactly ready yet. But if not, you guys can basically fellowship, talk a little bit more, look around at the books and things. Tomorrow we're going to start at 9 a.m. and get going, and we'll have worship again. Garrett's going to open the word for us again. Tom and I will be leading us and pointing us to Christ through song, and then we'll get into our third and fourth sessions with the panel discussions. We'll have another ladies' time tomorrow as well. Hopefully that was an encouraging time for the ladies over there. Was it encouraging, Sarah?
Right.
All right, good. Glad to hear that. Again, just housekeeping things. You'll have the books and things will still be out. We did notice, apparently, some people have tried on the t-shirts, and apparently they are at least a size larger than what you probably normally wear. So try them on and let us know. We have a whole bunch over there, so just come and switch them out if you want to. Or keep the size larger, and Christmas time is coming, and you're going to gain some weight anyway. Yes. And earlier we were mentioning different books and those who donated. We did mention Kriegel, and they also donated. The 40 questions books that you guys have been grabbing over there, those all came from Kriegel as a donation. And then Zondervan did the counseling ones. Go back over there, make sure that you look closely at the books over there.
Just one plug, if you have not had a chance to look over Phil's 40 questions on pastoral ministry, that's one I wish I would have had so early. It's such a great book. It's your best, I think. I thought the other one was my favorite. That's my favorite now.
I did want to give opportunity. Jim, did you want to just come up for a second, say anything else about you guys or what you said earlier? You feel good? Make sure you get over to them, okay? Make sure if you haven't yet, get over to them. Jason, some of you guys, Phil, I'd like you to just mention about Pillar, because they're one of the partners here that have been helping with us.
Yeah.
If you mention Pillar, and Jason, if you want to mention the ministry that you're with as well.
Okay. The Pillar Network started about 10 years ago. It originally began as a church planting network with a few pastors that were doing the very thing we've been talking about. They were training up some guys, sent them out to plant churches. These guys started coming back, asking questions. They wanted to replicate what was happening, and before long, they started a network, morphed into the Pillar Network, so that we're partnering together to equip churches, plant churches, and revitalize churches. And that can be nationally and internationally. Right now, I don't have the exact count, but there's something like 415, 420 congregations. A fourth of them are international, which has been super exciting. We just had our first congregation added from South Africa, Doug Van Meter. Yeah. And so that's really really exciting to see that. And the Pillar Network has an annual conference, the Unite Conference, in the early October, and then there are lots of regional conferences. I saw a number the other day. It was, I want to say, almost 30, maybe. I mean, this would be considered one of those regional conferences. So lots of regional conferences. There's also a spring intensive, and that will be in Nashville in February, right at the end of February, at Edgefield. I started to say Edgewood. Edgefield Church, where Matt McCullough is pastor. And this year, I know I'm doing a talk on pastoral leadership. So whatever the other talks are, I think we're just kind of getting back to some of the basics on pastoral ministry on this one. But I did the one in Irving last year and the one in Atlanta the year before, and they were super, super helpful. And it's intensive. You got a couple of days, and you got lots of seminars, and then we have some fun together as well. So I'll be happy to talk to you about the Pillar Network. I'm the director of pastoral care and mentoring, so I just spend my time trying to help pastors, elders, churches troubleshoot, do a little counseling, do a few conferences, and a few things like that.
Jason Woodford, for you?
We partnered with Anchored in Truth 12 years ago, roundabout. I was pastoring a church, and if you don't mind me just being very blunt, where we prayed the prayer, walked the aisle, signed the card, joined the membership. We had about 770 on the roll, about 250 that attended. We'd never heard of the term church discipline. I mean, we loved Jesus, and we preached the Bible, but we were unhealthy. And I didn't know anyone. I knew something was wrong, but I didn't know where to look at that time to fix it. And in God's providence, I got connected with a pastor in Alabama named Jeff Noblet and Anchored in Truth Missions, and those guys came alongside of us. And over the past 12 years, they have mentored myself, our leaders, our church, and they have an entire network where they seek to come alongside of church revitalization works, church plants. They have church plants nationally, internationally, and their annual conference is called the True Church Conference. Their organization is actually out of a local church, and it's based on the biblical construct of local churches partnering together to plant healthy, emphasis on healthy local churches. And so we've just gotten in with them, and that's what we're giving ourselves to, the church plants and revitalization works that they're doing all across the world. This year we've gone to Peru and partnering with church plants there, and we've gone to Detroit nationally and partnering there. And they also have started what they call their Pastoral Training Institute. And, we've talked a lot about local church training of pastors. And, there are places where brothers who are being called into the ministry, either for whatever reason, can't attend seminary at this point, or maybe their local church isn't able to provide the training. And Anchored in Truth is providing that for these men who are needing that local, hands-on pastors training future pastors. And they're able to do it online, or they can do internship programs there. So if you have any questions about it, I'll be glad to answer.
And that is not just Southern Baptist churches, that would be other Baptist churches as well, or?
Yes.
And Pillar?
Pillar's SBC in the U.S. and Baptistic everywhere else.
Everywhere else.
Yeah.
All right, so dinner will be ready in 15 minutes, so you have some time to hang out. I will say this, if you're not going to be back tomorrow, let me know. We put together, thankfully, Dave sent us, he's with his DMIN, his project, as he said before, is residencies and research there. So he sent us, it was 5 churches, is that correct? 5 churches, and what they're doing with their internship or apprentice programs, and it has their kind of curriculum and syllabus. And then we've added about 4 or 5 more to this binder that we want to give out to you tomorrow to be able to take and say, hey, this is helpful, we don't like that, this is a good reading list, and you can just use it. And so if you're not going to be here tomorrow, let me know, and let Jacob know, he'll grab you a binder. If you're going to be here tomorrow, then just wait, we'll give it to you tomorrow, okay? And last thing, after we eat, whoever wants to, this is extra, 6:30 back in here, I'd like to discuss, I want to work together, we're not going to get specifics as far as people's names. I want to talk through church discipline. This isn't an official, part of the conference, just in here, whoever would like to talk more about biblical church discipline. We have a book we've given you that Mark's gave us to give to you, but how to actually flesh that out, and I'll convince some of these guys to be in here with us too, just to talk, just roundtable discussion on church discipline scenarios right after you eat 6:30 in here, okay? Someone, Ashton, would you pray today and close our time, and pray for the food too? Yeah.
God, thank you for truth and for being faithful and for not changing. And I thank you for this time today. I pray that it's been honoring to you. I pray that we are sponges and that we apply the truth to our lives for your glory. Thank you for the food, for the hands that have prepared it. I pray that you bless them. God, use us as faithful servants wherever you see fit. We're available. Maybe just give this time to you. In Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, everybody. Good first day. Like it.